And then you guys moved back to New York.
Yeah.
And you were going back and forth to New York?
Yeah, me and my mom, we lived in Europe, but we would come back every like year or year and a half or so to see my grandparents and my aunts and stuff. And so we always had that connection to New York. We always came back, and I was here during all like the pivotal moments in history in New York. Like, I remember Son of Sam, which was huge if you were here. I remember the blackouts, which were also huge if you were here. I remember the garbage strike, which was also insane because you had like, 20-foot mountains of garbage every fucking where. I mean, the city stank. I mean, like I remember all the madness of New York. I mean, I moved back here for good in '79, like I guess January or February of '79. It was like the week Sid died. Actually, the Stimulators were supposed to play Max's the one weekend that he was playing, and he died before the show. But yeah, it was a much different place back then. You guys know, but a lot of people who have only been here over the last 20 years, they have no clue.
Yeah, it is a different place, and I mean, in the book you got crazy pictures like you and Andy Warhol.
Yeah,
because you were just it was your aunt Denise that was running with them.
Well, no, actually,
or is that just a random?
My
picture?
mom actually knew him. She had been in one of his movies when she was young, when she was like 15 or something, and that picture was just taken at the Clash show. Like I used to run into people like him at different clubs and stuff. This was backstage at a Clash gig the first time they played in New York.
You look like you're about 10.
I was actually 12 in that picture. But yeah, I mean, I was at all the clubs all the time. I mean, it was actually. It was, kind of weird, thinking back on it, because like, I mean, when I did a thing with Anthony Bourdain a while back, and he was like, he's like, I remember standing in front of clubs like Max's and trying to get in, and here would come this like 12-year-old kid who just like walk through the fucking door, like the bouncers would just like let him in, like like he belonged in there, and I'm like, why the fuck is this child here? Like, who let him in, and who the fuck is he, and why are they serving him like he's the fucking mayor, And thinking back, it's fucking a little strange, I mean, I was the youngest kid that you around on the club scene back then, and then as time went on, my band, the Stimulators, were really had a lot to do with it. The crowds at the shows started getting younger and younger because, like, we started pulling a very young following. Go figure, 12-year-old in the band, and people like the Beastie Boys, they started coming to see it before they were the Beastie Boys. They were just fans of ours, friends of mine. They were like some of my best friends growing up, and then a lot of other people who went on to start a lot of the first wave of New York hardcore bands were fans of the Stimulators, kids who were all like, in their early teens when they used to see us play. And then they went on to start a lot of the bands that, set off that next wave.
How long did you play with the Stimulators for?
I had only played with them from like 79 to like 80, maybe the beginning of 81, and then I was done with it because at that point I had already, the Bad Brains had come to New York, and I was all that first hardcore that came out from, Black Flag to Circle Jerks to Minor Threat, and of course bands like Discharge from overseas, from England, and all that shit was starting to really take over my soul. And so I was like, you know what, I can't play with the fucking Stimulators anymore. This shit is too poppy, it's too like, it's happy, it's just not, it's not where I am. And at that point I had already, the life I was living on the streets and the life that the other band members were living was not really the same. I was just hitting my teens, and as we all know, that's when the problems begin. That's when you start getting in trouble. So, yeah. And the music that I started writing really reflected the feelings that I was having, and because of not just the environment, but just everything leading up to that point had created this person. And it was a really violent neighborhood. It was a really violent neighborhood, and I ate a lot of shit for being white, and which is ironic because I'm quarter Dominican and I'm Cherokee and I'm Choctaw. But if you look at me, especially in an all Puerto Rican neighborhood, I'm a white boy. So I really ate a lot of shit. I really. Until I started fighting and actually started getting more, I hate to say it, but started getting more violent. That started to earn me a little bit of respect, and I guess the fear and the credibility kind of went hand in hand. Like when people knew that they couldn't fuck with me, I started getting respect, and I don't really think that's a really healthy for a young mind to associate popularity with violence and aggression,
Yeah, and I mean New York at that time, and like you said, and I used to come down to New York sometimes when I was younger, and it was completely different, in the mid '80s. And you were there earlier than that, but for me in the mid '80s when you'd come down here, it was completely different. I mean, we're sitting here right now in Times Square. Times Square was.
It was fucking nuts
It
around
was
here,
nuts, man. There was you take every two steps, somebody be offering you drugs.
I used to come here when I'd cut school and just watch people get pickpocketed, watch the hookers turning tricks and the guys selling drugs and the people getting into trouble. And
it was
madness.
It was crazy.
It was a fucking free for all.
It was crazy.
It was really.
And where you were living, there was
it was
just
way
central.
worse. It was way worse. I mean, I was talking to Ice-T the other day. We were talking about some of our experiences, and just in my area alone, I mean, there was about 5 or 6 gangs within a 10, 15 block distance. Everything from the hitmen on my block who were fucking really out of control to the Hells Angels on 3rd Street, who back then were like legitimately no fucking joke. Mm-hmm. I mean, I could tell you some fucked up stories, but you could tell me fucked up stories too. So where does that go? It goes into,
it's hard to. If people go to New York now, it's just completely different.
Yeah,
it really is, man. It really is
it's impossible to really get it. I mean, the best thing you could do is look at like some old movies that kind of try to capture the
and you got
vibe.
Some pictures in the book that show the neighborhoods.
Yeah,
and you can tell they look like a war zone.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't know, but they look as close to one.
They look like a war zone. Yeah. You can take it from me on that one. They look like a war zone.
I mean, dude, I was living in a squat. We literally had no running water, no windows, no doors.
How old were you when you moved out?
On your own, I left home when I was 14. Because basically I was getting into so much trouble in school that they were about to basically take me from my mother and put me in Spofford. And I was like, fuck this. I had lost interest in school and all of that shit. Yeah. It's actually funny. Something I wanted to tell you. When I was 15, actually, just right down there was a recruiting center, Army, Marines, Navy, the whole bit. And when I was 15, I tried to enlist in the Marines, because at that point I was very. I guess I had a lot of pent up aggression, and I was just like, I just want to fucking, I probably shouldn't say this. It probably sounds bad for the military, but I just wanted to kill. I just wanted to fucking kill, and I wanted to be able to. I just was so fucking and it didn't help that my mother was a hippie, so just it's natural for a teenager to rebel against everything their parents believe in. I mean, I had fucking recruiting catalogs and shit under my bed, whereas most kids probably had, their Playboys and shit. My mom would find my military recruiting shit and be like, what is this? Instead of holding up the fucking, penthouse, what is this? She's like, I didn't raise my son to be no soldier. Get on her fucking hippie fucking tangents.
There's a lot of guys in the military.
Man,
so
I'm like, fuck this.
Through the years, you're 100% right, because through the years, there's so many guys in the military, and you meet some guy, and you're like, hey, how's it going? You learn their last name at first, but then you get to know him a little bit, and you're like, oh, what's your first name? And they'll be like, oh, my first name is Rainbow. Or my first name is, Ocean. And then they go, yeah, my parents were hippies, And so many kids rebelled against their hippie parents. They're like, I'm going in the Marine Corps. I'm going in the Army. Dude. I'm going in the SEAL teams. That's very common. So you're 100% right. It's a good way to rebel. And I even say this, for me, hardcore was a rebellion.
Oh, yeah.
And going in the military for me was a rebellion against the norm. Was everyone's going to, hey, I'm gonna go be a hippie, smoke dope, go to college, get a job, and I was like, no, I'm gonna go be a commando and just get after it.
Fuck yeah, dude.
So,
you know what? It's fucked up because it's like, had I followed those instincts, in some ways my life would have been probably a million times better. I would have had a lot more, discipline. I would have had a lot more focus. I would have had more positive shit, going on. I would have learned some skills and shit, but at the same time, I wouldn't have fucking written Age of Quarrel. I wouldn't have written Best Wishes. I wouldn't have influenced people like you to be, to go above and beyond what the fuck I could ever fucking try to do, So it's like I feel like in my own way, I managed to do my service to, humanity, if you will, although it was a disservice in a lot of ways because I did inspire a lot of people to do a lot of really fucking wrong shit, but nonetheless, the inspiration that it was real, it was genuine. I think that's why 30 years later, people still give a fuck about that record, and people are still out making money on that record, and people still cover songs off that record, and it's funny because I was telling you earlier, that lineup that played on that record only lasted for one fucking record. It's amazing how short a period of time. Yeah. And it's like, and it was something special because still now, 30 years later, people are still talking about it. And not many people could say that based on one fucking album.
Yeah.
So.
That's good shit. I'm just gonna go, like, we were talking about your neighborhood. This is just kind of a sample of what you were living around and in. Back to the book. I remember one night lying there, hearing some chick down the street getting raped.
Yeah.
And knowing there was really nothing to do. It was like a helpless feeling. You knew that if the cops got called, it wouldn't matter because they probably wouldn't show up. And if they did, it would be too late and they probably wouldn't find her.
Yeah.
One night, my mother's then boyfriend got the tip of his nose almost shot off by a zip gun. He has a scar to this day. Yeah. Just because he was white, looked a little freaky, and was walking down our block. I remember coming home one night, and my aunt and Ann Gustafson, the Stimulators bassist, got jumped by 6 dudes with golf clubs and shit, trying to pull her guitar out of her hands. You don't really think about a group of guys jumping 2 chicks and a kid, but that shit happened. They didn't give a fuck. You've got to figure a lot of these guys would hang out and huff glue and shit. And when you huff glue and you smoke a lot of dust, you get pretty grim and lean towards violence.
Yeah.
So there's your surroundings, there's your environment.
Yeah. It's I'll tell you, man, it's almost harder to hear it being read back to me now, especially in your voice. But it's like, it's real, and it brings back a serious emotional response in me,
As I was reading that, I was just thinking to myself, because you and I, in the scene, there was always guys that had dogs, right?
Mm-hmm.
Pit bulls. Everyone had pit bulls. Mm-hmm. And as I was reading that, you and I both know, if you take a pit bull and you bring it up and you beat it and you torture it and you hurt it, that dog's going to be a mean, evil bastard. And if that dog's brother can get brought up and get fed and get taken care of and, sleep and gets treated good, and that dog's going to grow up and be nice. And, I just thinking you take a person, a human being, and you put them in an environment where that's what they're living with and that's what they're seeing and that's what's around them, they're going to tend towards that direction.
Yeah.
And it's going to be hard to break out of that shit.
It is, and it's, look around at the world, man. Look at all all the fucking ghettos everywhere. Look at all the, a lot of people don't get outside of this country, who live here. So people don't realize how well they have it. Yeah. And even, I used to laugh. I was talking to my friend Melly Mel, and I was saying, I don't even understand what the fuck's up with all that like West Coast gangbang and shit. I mean, these guys, first of all, they don't even have to deal with winter. Okay. Second of all, they all got like yards and garages and fucking barbecues and shit.
Yeah.
Like, we grew up in like apartments with fucking rats and roaches and, concrete everywhere.
Yeah.
And, what the fuck are you so pissed about that you need to go and shoot at each other and kill each other? You that fucking bored? Like, it's just,
It is an interesting dynamic here in New York City. The way it is.
Yeah, it's very intense.
It's.
I mean, even now that it's like, soft as fucking baby shit, it's still intense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I feel confined when I'm here. Now that I've grown up, when I come here, and I live in California.
Yeah.
And you're right, I got a yard, and I got a barbecue.
See that shit?
and my neighbors have yards, and
they say good morning.
Yeah, it's like, hey, what's going on? And it's like you have space, man. Space is a real thing, and animals. You can't put an animal in a little tiny cage; they get pissed off. And that's what you do with 8 million people in New York.
Yeah.
Put them in little tiny cages. They start getting pissed off.
Yeah, especially when the good majority of them are broke as shit.
Yeah.
Yeah.